welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of I'm Mr. Pierre, and I'm so glad to be joined by another guest on the podcast. Jerome, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Anytime I'm able to speak to a black man who's in education, I'm really happy about it because I know that in here in the States, we only make up to less than 2%
Yeah.
of teachers who are in front of students. So we are we're like those unicorns, and so I want to ensure that those of us who are out there don't feel so isolated, that there is a community of others who are doing the work, who have been doing the work, that can give some sort of advice on how to maintain this work and be able to do it for hopefully a long time. And if it's not a long time, that's good too. Hopefully you're here for a good time, even if it's not a long time, because ultimately that's what our kids need. Our kids need black male teachers who love what they do while they're in front of it, and not the opposite. Because I know for myself, I've had a couple teachers who I'm like, why are you here?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like you. It doesn't feel like you really are having a good time. So um, let's make it best for everyone. And if you got an exit stage left, then so be it.
Right. Right.
But if we could start there on a positive note, how did you come into education?
Ooh. So man, that's a long story. So I'm gonna try to do my best to make it short and sweet as possible. So when I was, let me say mid-20s, I was getting married and I was moving to where I live now in South Georgia, and I had this, back then I wasn't trying to get into education. It just wasn't an idea of mine at the time. And I ended up marrying a young lady who was an educator, and she kept trying to like turn me in that direction, And oddly enough, I'm the grandson of an educator and the son of an educator, both in public schools, homeschool, college, and they had talked to me about it for years as well. And so this young lady, when we were married, she said, "Listen, I just think it'd be a good idea." And I was like, "Well, okay, it can't be that bad, And so I, basically ended up going and putting my resume into different places, trying to take the assessments to get certified, and
Yeah,
ended up falling into it around 2018. Yeah, because that was around
yeah.
my daughter was born. So long story, try to make a long story short as possible.
Awesome, awesome. And what's been the thing? So 2018 to now, so we got about 6 or 7 odd years. Um, what's been the thing that's kept you in education?
It's double sided for me. If I'm
Okay.
gonna be honest. So with education, um, it's always been a little bit tough for me because it's a weird. It's kind of a bit tough for me just because when I had initially started out, I had this. I don't know why I had this vision, but I had this vision of being this great teacher, right? Like you see the movies and the Morgan Freeman and Lean on Me, and I think
Yeah.
Denzel Washington had a movie in the mid '80s that he did about some famous educator from Los Angeles, and then you see the I forget the other gentleman, other actor. I think it was Edward James Olmos or something who did the one with the East Los Angeles High School and things of that nature. And so, in my idea, then I'm thinking, man, I'm going to go in there. Now, I am realistic as well, but then
Yeah.
I was thinking I'm going to teach these kids. They're going to see a young African American male, and they're going to be like, hey, I hadn't seen one of those, and let me just make this connection because I'm dark skinned, he's dark skinned, and this, that, and the third, and so on and so forth. And so when I went into the school, I'm thinking that I'm gonna make a huge impact. I don't know why. But then I get in there and reality strikes. I had
Yeah.
students that were my skin color, Hispanic American, Caucasian American, Asian American, and they did not care about me being in that classroom. They were like, whatever, whatever,
Yeah.
that has no, it doesn't mean too much, to me, speaking as the child. So, at that time in my life, I was thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go in there and try to make this huge impact. Now, I still wanted to make an impact when the reality hit me that, young
Right.
people are just young people. They're not thinking in terms
Yeah.
of, hey, this
No.
educator is gonna make a difference and things of that nature. So
Yep.
I say all that to say is that what it ended up doing for me was it reminded me to just try to do the best that I can do as far as hopefully making a difference in their lives. And maybe like I could drop a nugget, along the way, as they're growing up. So,
Right.
the big thing that, for me, as far as what keeps me in education, I would say, to be able to do what I do really for my children, my own two kids, I wanted them to see a person who wanted to make an impact in his community. And so, being an educator was one of those things that I feel like I could do to make an impact in the community. When I, interact with young men and young women, I was teaching at a middle school last year. Now I'm doing, I'm sure we'll get more into it later. Now I'm doing virtual school,
Cool.
virtual high school, and I wanted them to see, their dad trying to make an impact on young people. And so, part of what I, tell people, like when I do my YouTube channel, um, I always say, this is to be a blessing to my fellow fathers and the next generation, right? And so that's kind of always my thinking as far as being in the classroom, being in education. I wanted to make some type of impact on the next generation, and it may not be, millions of kids or whichever, but maybe just a little bit, that there will be those kids that grow up and say, you know what? I remember I used to tell my students this last year when they would get mad at me about having to do work. And I would just tell them, look, you don't have to like me to be successful in my class. I don't, I'm not sure, if somebody told you that or what, but you don't have to like me. You know, I just want you to know or try to hold on to something that I told you. And that, hopefully you'll go off and be great and go chase excellence. And maybe you could, think back, not necessarily let you remember my name, but you could say, you know what, there was some teacher I had, I can't remember his name, but there was some teacher I had that made an impact, and I could be, good with that.
That's awesome. Like, to someone who's listening or watching, I hope that point lands,
Yeah,
that as much, because there are two things that I heard that I that resonated with me. Was number one, um, I think we all come into the profession like, I want to have an impact. I want, if you've seen the Lean on Me, the Stand By Me, the Great Debaters, Dangerous Minds, Freedom Riders, whatever the movie was, that this depiction of, here's a teacher who comes in, and within 2.5 to 2 hours, by the end of the movie, they've made X progress, and it's like the kids are graduating, they made this generous look. So all of that, you see that, and you're like, oh, that would be great. Like,
right,
ultimately, I started off with something, and I helped it get to hopefully a better place. I think as most teachers coming into the profession, that's something that resonates with all of us. And the second thing too is like, it's not about you per se. It's
right,
about the students. And
right,
so realizing like, hey, you don't have to like me. I'm not looking for you to hate me, but
right,
like, we don't have to be best friends in order for you to be successful, in order for you to retain whatever it is that is being taught. So I think that resonates with me a lot, and I'm sure there are going to be others who hear this who are like, oh, okay, so it's not just me. There are
right,
others who are
right.
experiencing this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's kind of the thing that I have tried. Whenever I had my students, um, that I was constantly trying to put that into their memory bank. Was that your education is, it's almost like what you make of it. It's not. I had students that would come in last year, or the last 3 years. I had taught at a middle school, language arts, and so I taught my first year there. This is after a year, actually, 1 year actually of being out of education. So, which is another long story. But anyway, that last 3 years, I was, teaching seventh and eighth grade. So last year I taught seventh grade language arts, and you know, they're middle school. I used to hear people say at the high school level and the elementary school level, they would say, "Man, God bless you all, man, because I don't know if I could do middle school kids, because these kids, their hormones are raging, so they're kind of bouncing off the walls a little bit, in the area that I am in South Georgia, probably like a lot of public schools actually. The poverty level is quite high, so unfortunately,
Yep.
you have a lot of fathers that are not in the home, and you got a lot of young people. This is why I used to tell people, because they would say, I remember, matter of fact, when you had said a minute ago about us being, African American males in education, I saw this in on a news recently. It may have not even been a couple weeks ago, where they were talking about, African American males being in education. It was like in Detroit or Chicago or something like that. And I remember I've told people that we would have meetings at the school out that where I was last year, and it was like, you look at statistics, look at that data. The high number of folks that are not being successful in the classroom on statewide testing is African American males, if I remember correctly. And I used to tell people that there would be teachers that were like, not really like looking at me like, hey, what do you think we could do? They didn't do that, which I'm grateful they didn't. But they were kind of like, we're trying to figure out what can we do to meet the student. That's always the thing that administrators, the board is looking at with teachers and things of that nature, trying different strategies to meet the student. And the thing I remember I used to think to myself is when I used to meet any of my students, I was always kind of trying to get them to want to meet me. We're professionals, right? We're given these different strategies. There are a ton of different books and things of that nature, a ton of different, educational organizations out there and platforms that, are trying to teach, teachers, different new ways, maybe possibly innovative ways to reach the student. But I used to always tell people that, the thing I realized though is what I think makes education so hard as a career or a calling is there's all the weight on the teacher to meet the student, but a lot of people, that's other teachers, that's administrators, that's the board, that's parents, sometimes the students themselves. Nobody ever talks to the student to reach the teacher. Like, so yes, there is the weight on us. We are the professionals. Yes, we went to school for this, and we went to get that certification. But I look at education as a two-way street. So meaning that myself or all of us that are teachers, we can't just, give you the information and then hope you will memorize it. Like, okay, this is my wish that you're going to memorize this. You got to say in your own mind as a young person, hey, oh, you know what? Mr. Danner said this. Let me go ahead and take that information and see what I can do with it to go and grow and be the very best that I can be. But again, that's the other tough part about it with education. So when you were given the list of those other movies, what I always thought was interesting about a lot of those movies. I don't know if you caught this yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of those movies I noticed, not all of them, but I think most of them, if you notice that the teacher that makes a difference, they really don't have a family or a home life. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah. Or
So,
they don't portray that as much as what they portray at the school.
right,
And so there's
right.
a bit of an imbalance of like, this person is pouring. Hold on. Pouring
Yeah,
at the school. And then
yes,
the home life is very minimal or non-existent. Yeah.
exactly. And so that was the realization to me. I remember, so again, we were always trying to come up with strategies to reach students. And I remember I told people, I said, the thing that really struck me as really one of those, I guess, was a strategy to reach students, which was getting out in that community and getting involved. But the struggle with that is a lot of teachers have families, so,
Yeah.
myself, I'm not married anymore, but I still have two kids, elementary school age. And where I taught was outside of the town I actually live in. So
Yeah.
when a lot of students would have a soccer game, track, football, basketball, cheerleading, baseball, or maybe a couple other things going on, I really couldn't go and support them as much as I would like to because I actually get to get back to my own children to go and support them.
Right.
And, so
Yep.
that was the thing I started realizing more and more that was, I think, difficult within education itself, that and that they would show in a lot of those movies, like you had made the point ago, a lot of those, they wouldn't even talk, deal with the person's family life because they wanted to show how like this great this educator was, and things of that nature. And many times they showed that person not even dealing with a family. They might have like talked
Yeah.
to them on the phone if they had parents or something like that, but they didn't really have to go to that home to a wife, 2, 3, 4 kids, 5 kids, you got that many kids,
Yeah.
and really try to reach out, and figure out, okay, well, how am I going to balance this with my children, and then deal with my quote unquote my children at the
Students.
school.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's that's a really tough part of education as well.
And I know a lot of novice teachers are hearing that and are like, oh, thank you for explicitly talking about that. Of you got to find the balance. You have to be okay with knowing, like, hey, if I've got 10 things to do today, me getting through 7 is all right. Like,
Right.
those other 3 things are going to be there tomorrow. I'll take care of them tomorrow.
Right.
But I need enough in my cup to make it home so that I am a husband to somebody else. I am a father to 1, 2, 3, however many kiddos, babies that you have. Like, and that is normal and should be expected. It shouldn't be expected that you are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, this teacher on for your students. Like, your students need to know, and admin, likewise, should be telling you as a novice teacher, like, no, 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 you're at the end of your contract hours. Go, leave. Whatever it is that you need to do, we'll be here tomorrow. Take care of it tomorrow. But sometimes that isn't explicitly stated, or because you have some veteran teachers who are just accustomed to being there very late, that you feel like, all right, this is the culture that I have to be here very late as well. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Go home.
Yeah.
Go home. And even if it isn't home, like, all right, my thing is I like to run. Great. Go get your run in. Make sure that you are filling your cup,
Hmm.
whatever that thing is, in order to be able to then pour into your students as a elementary, middle, or a high school teacher. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. 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 You definitely hit the nail on the head on that one, especially when you pointed out that there are some things that you just won't get done in that day, or on the same day, or in literal 24 hours. I was pretty fortunate that, and again, I used to tell people all the time that, you know, uh, everything is, well, not everything, but many things are subjective, right? So even you and I could, let's say we worked in the same school, we could have the same principal. Um,
Yep.
and he might observe us both and seem like he does a lot of things for us both. And you may have one opinion of him, and I have a completely different opinion. So I
Yeah.
say that, so if anybody, from my previous school would see this and they would say, well, didn't like that principal. I would say, look, that was you. All I can say was,
Yeah.
when I was going through, I want to get, I won't try to get too personal. I probably, you probably don't do that too much on your show, but I would say that when I went to my last school, I was going through a divorce, and my um uh that my person that was leaving me, uh that was a tough time. And so when I was getting my first teaching job post divorce, or as I was going through a divorce, uh he was really there for me, really supportive of me, really encouraged me. And I remember one of the things he used to tell to myself and all of the teachers in our meetings was, look, you know, you can't do everything in a day. And on top of that, you have to remember that most of you, I think almost every one of us, when I was at that school, had families. And so you have
Yeah.
to get out of this building and go take care of your children. And you have to go out
Yep.
there and take and help do things for your parents or your wife or husband or whoever. And so that was kind of the thing that I was glad you pointed that out, that, you know, especially for if I was to ever cross paths with a new teacher, I would tell them it's a very difficult thing to balance, home life with work life, but you got to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get burnt out. And I think that's what happens with
Yeah.
some teachers who leave the field of education so early. Besides the fact that they probably realized it wasn't what their calling, what they were meant to do, or what they thought it was going to be. Um, but a lot of them leave probably because they did not ever figure out, or maybe they weren't taught how to balance that home life with the work life.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
key.
Absolutely. Because if maybe I'll ask you first. If there is one thing, is there one thing that you now in the several years that you've been an educator, you're like, yo, if I had known this earlier, would have helped me out. What would be if you could jump into your time machine and go back, slip yourself a note. It can't be a ginormous book. It's just one thing like, hey, remember this. This is gonna help you out. What would be that one thing?
Man, honestly, brother, I would tell my younger self, do not go in there and think of yourself as the next whatever the character's name was and lean on me. Don't
Yeah.
go in thinking that you're going to be the next Morgan Freeman or James Clark, whatever his character's name was. I
Yeah.
can't remember the name of that principal, but you know, and if I would add to it, I would just say, and I would say this, you have to kind of be careful with this next statement that I'm going to say, which is you can't really go in there and be really loving. So what I mean by that is I'm a religious person. So when I went in the classroom, I'm thinking I'm going to give them the love of, this person that I believe in, this being that
Yeah.
this greater creator being that I believe in. So I'm going to do that, and it's gonna have a sway over them. I don't know, power or something. So when I remember one of the first things I said when I got in the classroom on like the first day, yeah, I said, I would say, hey, even if you don't love me, I'm going to love you. Now, in a sense, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, you want your students to know that you're there for them. But then I had to realize
Yeah.
these are, because my first year I taught at a middle school. They were sixth graders.
Yep.
These are 11, 12, 13-year-olds. Some of my students were held back. Some were even 14. A couple were even 15. They don't care. They don't care that I love
Yeah.
them. They really don't. They
No.
not one bit. And so I had to
Yep.
realize, let me just kind of take that part out. And let me go
Yep.
ahead and let them know that when they come in my classroom, and this is, again, what I would tell my younger self, that you have to be about business like the first day. I knew teachers when I would hear teachers say that, but I thought, man, they would say stuff like, uh, I was trying to remember what was like one of their quotes, but they would basically say stuff like, you can't be nice when you start your first few years. You have to be mean. I remember thinking, but that's not my personality. Like, because I
Yep.
was the one who was coming in the classroom, quote unquote, from the street and did not go to
Yeah.
school. When I got my bachelor's degree, I got my bachelor's degree in anthropology, so it was not in elementary
Education.
education or education. So that being said, I'm coming in straight from the street. So I'm thinking like, man, I'm going to just put my personality into it. Of course, I know not everybody likes me in real life. So I know not every kid is going to like me, and, but I'm going to make those connections, right? It's going to work. What I did not realize is that it's not so much about being mean, but it's about being business first. Like, when you come in this classroom, my job is to try to get you
Yeah.
there. So I can't afford to be your friend. I can't be your friend anyway, just because you're a child and I'm an adult, and that would
Yep.
cross those boundaries anyway.
That dynamic. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that dynamic simultaneously is going to probably give you some type of or give that young person some type of false narrative that, okay, well, he's so nice, he's going to just let me do whatever. And my first year, I was terrible at classroom management. So if a kid
Yeah.
over here is sitting by their, their friend or whichever, and they keep talking, then I was like, well, I just go talk to them, and then they're going to do better because I'm going to be that fatherly figure and, encourage them. And, this, and those kids didn't care. They're like, look, you better move me because I'm not going to stop talking. And then
Yeah.
when they would, number of them would get disrespectful in my face, tell me what they're not going to do and things of that nature. And I'm like, oh, big, it'll be all right and stuff like that. And I had to realize that, look, when you come in here, I say that we're going to do work and you are going to write and you're going to write what I say is on that board and you're going to do this. And when you do not do it, you got to get out of my classroom because I am the authority in this classroom. And your parents don't send you to school for you to just lay your head down on your desk, try to sneak and look at your cell phone, try to talk to your buddy. They don't, they may not tell you, but they send you here to get an education, to grow in knowledge in some way, shape, or form. So that's a couple of things actually. The things that I would have told myself is that, one, don't try to go in there with these, like these visions of grandeur. I think that, is the word for it, where you're like, oh, I'm just going to make a difference and it's going to be so great and this, that, and the third. Just go in there like, look, I want to be a blessing to them, but this is a job and I have to do
Yeah.
the very best that I can. And then, two, this is business. Matter of fact, when we had to, and I'll, be quiet after this. This was,
Wow.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it, brother. I don't get a chance to talk to a lot of people. I'm always by myself in general when I don't have my kids. So one of the things that my principal did last year, he did it like 2 years in a row, if I remember correctly. He would tell us, pick a word that's going to be like your word for the year. And I think, I can't remember what was my word in the previous year, but my word last school year, 2023, 2024, was business or straight business or something to that effect. And I told him, I said, when kids come in the classroom this year, they're gonna get a different beast. It's the same animal, but a different beast. So you come in the class like previous years, I would let kids, you're not having a good day. Oh, I get it. You feel sick. Oh, I understand. Oh, you're sleepy, because a lot of them, again, it was a high poverty area. So a lot of those kids, not that they even had like bad home lives. It would just be that, if they went home and, you give a kid a cell phone, if you're not taking it away from them, then
Look,
they're gonna be a kid. They're gonna be on the phone.
Yep. Kids are
So
gonna be kids, yeah.
exactly. And so that being said, they would come back the next day, man, Mr. Danner, I'm tired. I'm sleepy. I'm like, look, you got to go and get this work done. I need you to get your pencil out, your paper out. And I was dealing with some guys and girls that were, in gangs and, doing, having criminal activity, later on after school or what have you. And so I would tell them, I said, listen, try to pull them out in the hole. I said, look, my goal is not to, embarrass you, make fun of you or whichever. But if I say do something, you got to do it. If you can't do it, you got to go. I can't, because what's going to happen is, and this is where I had to learn. Again, this is another thing I would tell my younger self, or my first year teacher self. If you allow that one student to, quote unquote, I want to say do what they want to do, but get away with certain things that you don't let another student do, the other student's going to see it. And they're going to be like, and I had students that would come, Mr. Danner, you let that student, make up a name, Ronnie, you let Ronnie talk, go to sleep in class. Why are you getting on me? And so I had to, come to that realization. Oh, you know what? Not only do I need to get on, be about business, which that's also going to mean that I need to be consistent with every student. So I would have,
Consistency. Yep.
yeah, and I had to. I
Absolutely.
literally, because what ends up happening, even, and again, there's another thing about being a teacher is we have to be careful, right? There are some students that might have IEPs. For folks who, watching, who don't know what IEP is, individualized education plan, because they're in special education. They may have certain accommodations. They may have certain struggles, learning disabilities. And so you have to kind of balance that out. Okay, well, that student literally may have issues with staying awake. That does happen. I get it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I would,
Yep.
pull that student aside and say, okay, so we need to talk to your parents and figure out what type of plan are we going to come up with. Because if you're going to sleep most times in class, then that means you really don't need to be in class. Or we need to put you in another room, or have another situation, or see if we can work out something with our administrators to get you, maybe like middle of class, you can go
Modify
get
something. Yeah.
exactly modify.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
another, another thing I would tell my younger self is not being afraid to modify. And I think this is something about life in general. I tell my children, my 8-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter, that life is going to call for you to be adaptable. That A word, adaptable.
Yeah.
We don't think about that.
Yep.
Sometimes we're like, oh, it's not that big a deal. We have to, just grow up and, things happen and this and the third. But we have to be adaptable. And I think
Yep.
that's what I would tell
Agreed.
teachers from the first year to when they're about to retire at 29 or 30 years, that you have to be adaptable. You think about how many times we have in the school I was in, the principal had come in that same year I did. So he had actually been there. He was being fourth or fifth year. Prior to him, they said I had colleagues that told me that every year, just about every year, they had like a different principal. So they really get a chance to make that connection. So that being said, they had to be adaptable. They didn't like it. A lot of teachers are, are pretty much like, I don't want to, change. But a part of life is being adaptable. So when you're adaptable, you're able to accept, okay, this is going to change up. Different students, different year. Sometimes you can have a new student comes in that's going to try you because they weren't here at the beginning of the year and they were used to something different. So you had to kind of pull them to the side. So anyway, I'm going to say just, leave it at that. But that's the biggest thing is, again, not having these visions of grandeur. Yes, you want to, be a great educator, but with accepting reality, and then as well as being adaptable. When things change in the classroom or in the school altogether, or with a new student or a co-teacher or what have you, and then lastly, making sure that you're consistent with business. If when you have that student come in the classroom, when your students come in the classroom, you can't, be changing up all the time. And honestly, for me, I couldn't be nice at the beginning. But that's me though. Other teachers may be different, but I knew I could not be nice and quote unquote be loving. I had to come in there like, look,
Yeah.
you gonna do what I say do, or you gonna get out. And then, oddly enough, after that Christmas break, that January February period, sometimes a little, a couple months before that, those kids, connected with me. Now I still had, issues with some students, but many times they kind of understood, okay, Mr. Danner's gonna make us work. So I had 7th graders that every time they came into class, they would tell their other friends, hey, I hope you're ready because Mr. Danner's gonna make us right today. And they hated it. But it was like a joke among us because they knew, I was about business. So.
But what that says to me is that you established a routine, a set of, you were consistent about something.
Right.
That when the kids walked in, they knew, all right, it's going to be A, B, C. This is what Mr. Danner does. I think kids are looking for that. And developmentally, myself as well, being a middle school teacher, I knew that the thing that I wanted to establish as soon as possible is what is the routine going to be? The work that's in front of us might be a little bit different, but what's our startup? What's our warm up? What's going to be this? Where's the mood meter? How does Mr. Pierre like me to walk into his classroom so that there's some sort of order and it's not just chaotic? Um, and when the kids see that that is consistent, that you actually are being true to yourself and like, hey, it wasn't done the way that I like it. Please, let's do it over again. Let's do it. This is the way that it should be done. Dot dot dot. And they see that you're doing that Monday through Friday, week after week, month after month. Then they're like, okay, I now know what to expect when I come into this space. Versus some days it's like this. He's running hot. He's running cold. What's it going to be?
Right.
And so that I think is something. If you are a novice teacher and you're listening, please, whatever your routine is, like Mr. Danner said, hey, this is how I am. I needed to learn what worked for me. You might be someone different. Like, no, I actually like to do it. That's fine. As long as I think you're consistent with it, you're gonna
Right.
be okay.
Right.
If
Right.
I could ask you, are there any books that you're reading or have read that you're like, yo, this has been really helpful, either like to fill your cup or, oh, pedagogically, this is really good, or just some things the content that you, whether it be math, whether it be ELA, history, science, whatever. Are there any books that you're reading that you highly recommend?
Well, I actually would recommend. Oh my goodness, I think I got it beside me. Actually, oddly enough, there was a book by Anthony Muhammad, "Transforming School Culture: How to Overcome um, How to Overcome Staff Division." So I know
Awesome.
it probably look backward on the screen right there. Um, so I think that's a pretty good book on education. Right now, I'm actually reading a book by C.S. Lewis. Or I just started rather, called The Weight of Glory. So that's, I'm a big C.S. Lewis guy. I like a lot of the older, more philosophical, type of people that write and kind of get you to think about things around you. I'm trying to grow more with reading and do
Cool.
more with reading because I just want to get better with that. I think reading just helps the brain, and I just
It really
want to do
does.
more with that in general. Yeah, yeah. Are you reading any good
Agreed.
books?
Agreed. At the moment, I'm reading We Want to Do More Than Just Survive. So this is my
Okay,
yeah, abolition
very
teaching and
cool.
the purpose of educational freedom. Like, similarly to, I think there's, as an educator, feeding your mind to keep it sharp, but also knowing, like, okay, where I started and where I am and where I hope to be shouldn't all be the same. There should
Right,
be some sort of progression of, hey, when I started off, I knew X, Y, Z. Now where I am, I know a little bit more than that, and I hope to, in a couple of years, be better so that I can do better. So that's that.
right, right. That's an excellent way of thinking.
This last this last question is, um, me being an 80s baby and I love music, love asking guests. If you were to create a playlist and it could be 5 artists, 5 songs, 5 albums, knowing that it could change at any point, what would
Yeah.
be on Mr. Danner, JD's playlist?
Woo, man, you right. Mine changes so much because I'm just a music, like you said, a music head, and like you, I'm an '80s baby, 1985. So oddly enough, a lot of the songs I listen to now, because a lot of the stuff that comes out nowadays, I don't really connect to. Maybe because I'm pushing 40, I guess. Um, so you have like I'm trying to think off the top of my head. One of my songs I love listening to constantly is "Human Nature" by Michael Jackson.
Oh,
I
MJ.
mean, it's
Good
MJ.
way to start.
Yeah, it's
Good
just
way to start.
it's
Oh,
Mike Jack,
yes.
man. It's hard to
Yes.
top Michael
Yes.
Jackson. He just has so many classics.
So
And
many.
so
Yeah.
you got "Human Nature" by Michael Jackson. I'll probably say because it's on top of my mind again. "I Keep Forgetting" by Michael McDonald. Um,
Okay.
that I don't know why. It's just Michael McDonald is for me is just one of the great voices from the 70s and 80s, quote unquote blue eyed
Yep.
soul. I think he had a really great
Yeah.
song with Patti LaBelle back in the day. But that "I keep forget not in love anymore," like that's just my jam.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
That's a
oh yeah,
bop.
man. Oh yeah. And so
Nice.
you got that one. Um, Oh my goodness! I think I'm gonna throw in there. This is probably gonna throw a lot of folks off because they were like, "What in the world is that?" But there's a guy. I think his name is like Matthew Wilder or something like that. Um. Oh my gosh! Now I'm forgetting the title of the song. Mm, mm, mm. if I remember, it's I think his name is Matthew Wilder. I remember the title. I'll try to say that one again. But so there's that one. Also, another one. I love a lot of '80s songs. That's pretty much almost all I listen to right now. Broken Wings by a group called Mr. Mister from the '80s. Let me not forget, my guy Bob Marley. He had a song from the '70s called "Waiting in Vain." Bob Marley again, he just had so many classics. Another one he has that I love is called Johnny Was. I Shot the Sheriff. And then, I could end it on Tupac was my guy as a kid. I don't know why, because I couldn't connect at all with any of the lyrics that he rapped about. But Dear Mama and Brenda's Got a Baby were just like, powerful, when I was a kid. That Dear Mama, I think, used to almost, because, just thinking about my own mother, used to almost drive me to tears. And Brenda's Got a Baby, for that to have come out in 90, 93, 94, somewhere in there. For him to have written that when, hip hop at that time typically was not, about, you're not really singing about your mama, or rapping about your mama, at least not in that way. That was a little different. And, Tupac, as you know, was he was definitely different. That's one of those folks that
transcending, yep.
Yeah, he was transcending. And I wish he had made it past 25. I think he would have probably been a completely different, person, as we all do. I mean, they've done studies that, talk about that our brain is not fully formed, until we're about 25.
Until after, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, he just, I think he just had to grow up and mature. He had been through a lot, as a young man without a father, and then his mother being a Black Panther. And basically, I don't know if she had him in jail, but, she was basically pregnant in prison and then had to, basically be her own lawyer, advocate for herself and get herself, prove her own innocence. And so to be born from that, I think he was just meant to be great. So anyway, those I think would definitely be, on my current playlist at the moment. But of course that would change tomorrow. So
absolutely. That's dope. Agree with you 100% in regards to Tupac Shakur in that I think, like I was saying before, like where you were, where you are, and where you're going is going to change and mature. And I think if he had more time, that we would have seen an evolution of an artist that we just didn't get to see, unfortunately, because his life was ended earlier than it should have been.
You're right.
But yeah, Dear Mama and Brenda's Got, like, for those early 90s, like that was it. That was it. Dope.
Totally
Folks, this was another great conversation with another great educator. JD, Mr. Danner, Jerome Danner, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, brother, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for reaching out. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Folks, there were a lot of gems dropped. I hope that you were able to pick up a few of them. One more time, he's Mr. Danner. I'm Mr. Pierre. And this has been another episode of the Chronicles of Mr. And we're